If you are over 60 and you have noticed that your hair is thinning even though you are eating well, taking biotin and doing everything you were told to do, what if the problem is not aging and not genetics, but the way your hair follicles have quietly changed how they accept nourishment? And what if one overlooked group of seeds is working where biotin no longer can? I'm Dr. Eliza Hart, a board-certified obstetrician and gynecologist, and for many years I've worked closely with women who are confused by one very specific question: why hair thinning after 70 seems stubborn even when nutrition looks right, and supplements like biotin are already part of the routine. What this video focuses on is not another vitamin to add, but a different way of nourishing hair that aging follicles can still respond to. After a certain age, hair no longer struggles because of a lack of nutrients, but because it struggles to use them. And this is where certain seed-based proteins begin to matter more than biotin ever could. Today, I'll explain why these seed proteins support hair differently and how they align with the way hair follicles function later in life. If this conversation resonates with you, please subscribe and leave a comment telling me which country you're watching from so I can see how far this message is traveling around the world. And make sure you watch until the end, because I have a small surprise related to this topic that many women find unexpectedly helpful. Now let's start by looking at why biotin so often stops being enough after 70. 1. Why biotin stops working after 70. As we move into our 70s, many women feel frustrated because they are still doing the right things, eating balanced meals, taking biotin faithfully, and yet watching their hair continue to thin in a slow, discouraging way. The reason is not that biotin suddenly becomes useless, but that the biology of the hair follicle quietly changes with age, especially after menopause. Hair follicles become less responsive and far more selective about what they absorb, which means a single vitamin can no longer do the job on its own. From a medical perspective, this shift is closely tied to hormonal decline, reduced blood flow to the scalp, and slower cellular activity inside the follicle itself. In my clinical experience, this is also the stage when follicles lose some of their ability to signal for nutrients, even when the bloodstream contains enough of them. Biotin supports keratin production, but it does not address inflammation around the follicle, declining protein utilization, or reduced cellular energy, all of which become more important after 70. This is why many women take biotin for years without seeing meaningful change, even when no deficiency is present. What matters now is not adding more supplements, but changing the type of nourishment you provide. Aging hair responds better to nutrients that deliver usable protein, gentle anti-inflammatory support, and steady cellular fuel, which is where seed-based proteins begin to outperform biotin. In practical terms, this means shifting routines rather than increasing dosage. Focus on consistent daily intake of easily digested protein-rich foods used in modest amounts and maintained over several weeks. Hair improvement at this stage is gradual, not dramatic, and depends on giving follicles what they can still recognize and use. For many women, this shift alone brings relief because it reframes hair loss not as failure, but as a signal to nourish differently. This understanding becomes the foundation for the approach we will build on next. 2. Flaxseed, anti-inflammatory foundation. What many women don't realize is that hair thinning after 70 often begins long before a strand ever falls, starting quietly in the tissue that surrounds each follicle, where low-grade inflammation slowly interferes with blood flow and nutrient delivery. This type of inflammation does not cause pain or redness, which is why it is so easy to overlook. Yet over time, it creates an environment where hair becomes weaker, finer, and less able to sustain normal growth cycles. From a medical standpoint, this inflammatory background is one of the earliest barriers that must be addressed before any regrowth strategy can work, especially in aging scalp tissue. Flaxseed plays a unique role here because it provides lignans and plant-based compounds that help calm this silent inflammatory response without stressing an aging digestive system. Unlike isolated supplements, flax works gently supporting circulation around the follicle, while allowing nutrients already present in the body to reach their intended destination more effectively. In clinical practice, this is often where women first notice subtle but encouraging changes, such as reduced daily shedding, improved scalp comfort, or hair that feels slightly more resilient to touch. How flaxseed is used matters just as much as why it works. Whole flax seeds often pass through the digestive tract untouched, especially after 70, so they should always be freshly ground. A practical and safe approach is to use 1 teaspoon of freshly ground flaxseed once a day mixed into warm oatmeal yogurt or a soft breakfast dish. Morning use tends to be easiest for consistency, and results depend on steady intake over at least 6 to 8 weeks, not higher doses. Flaxseed is not meant to force regrowth on its own, but to prepare the scalp environment so hair follicles can respond again. Once inflammation is gently reduced, the follicles become far more receptive to the next layer of support. 3. Pumpkin seeds, hormonal protection for thinning hair. There is a moment many women describe in their 70s when hair thinning no longer feels random but patterned, showing up along the part line at the temples or in areas that once felt dense and resilient. This pattern is not accidental, and it often reflects subtle hormonal pressure that continues long after menopause has passed. From a medical perspective, shifts in androgen activity can still influence hair follicles later in life, encouraging gradual miniaturization that makes each new strand finer than the last, even when overall hormone levels appear stable and blood tests seem reassuring. Pumpkin seeds are especially valuable at this stage because they support hair in a way that aligns with these hormonal changes rather than fighting them aggressively. They provide plant compounds and amino acids that help reduce the impact of hormonal signals on vulnerable follicles, allowing them to maintain their size and strength longer. In practice, this does not mean dramatic regrowth overnight, but a slowing of loss that many women notice first in the shower drain or on their pillow, which is often an important emotional turning point that restores a sense of control. Using pumpkin seeds correctly makes a meaningful difference. Shelled pumpkin seeds, sometimes called pepitas, are easier to digest and absorb, especially for aging stomachs that produce less acid than before. A small daily portion, about a quarter cup or a modest handful, is sufficient when used consistently. They can be eaten raw, lightly roasted, or sprinkled onto soups and soft meals, depending on comfort and preference. Most women do best when pumpkin seeds become part of a daily routine, rather than an occasional addition paired with adequate hydration throughout the day. Changes tend to appear gradually over 6 to 8 weeks, often beginning with reduced shedding rather than visible thickening. This gentle hormonal support creates stability, giving hair follicles the breathing room they need before deeper rebuilding can begin. 4. Sunflower seeds, circulation and nighttime repair. One of the most overlooked reasons hair struggles to recover after 70 is not a lack of nutrients, but a lack of delivery, because even the best nourishment is ineffective if it cannot reach the follicle when it is most receptive. With aged scalps, circulation becomes slower and more uneven, which means oxygen and nutrients arrive late in smaller amounts or not at all. Medically, this reduced microcirculation changes the rhythm of the hair cycle itself, shortening the growth phase and leaving follicles undersupported during repair. Sunflower seeds matter here because they bring a form of vitamin E that supports vascular function and helps improve blood flow to delicate scalp tissue without overstimulating it. This is not about forcing circulation, but about restoring steadiness so follicles receive a reliable supply of what they need. Clinically, this is often when women notice their scalp feels less tight or sensitive, and hair begins to feel slightly more pliable rather than brittle, which is an early sign that circulation is improving. Timing is where sunflower seeds quietly outperform many supplements. Hair repair is most active during sleep when the body prioritizes restoration over activity. Using sunflower seeds in the evening allows their nutrients to be available during this overnight repair window when follicles are biologically primed to respond. A practical approach is 2 tablespoons in the early evening taken plain or mixed into soft foods, avoiding sugary combinations that interfere with absorption. If this idea about nighttime nourishment feels new to you, type 1 in the comments. And if it's something you've already tried or intuitively felt made sense, type 0, because your experience helps shape what we explore next. Consistency matters more than quantity, and benefits tend to appear gradually over several weeks. When circulation improves at night, follicles regain their ability to repair rather than merely survive, creating a natural bridge toward deeper structural support in the next phase. 5. Sesame seeds tahini, mineral restoration. As hair thins with age, many women notice a second, quieter change happening alongside it, where strands not only become finer, but also more fragile, losing their elasticity and breaking more easily, even with gentle care. This shift is not only about protein or hormones, but about minerals that quietly support the internal structure of each hair fiber. From a medical perspective, one of the most overlooked contributors here is a gradual decline in trace minerals that play structural and protective roles inside the follicle. Sesame seeds are particularly relevant at this stage because they provide copper and supportive minerals that aging hair increasingly depends on. Copper is involved in maintaining the integrity of hair fibers and supporting pigmentation pathways, which is why deficiency can show up as brittle texture dullness or accelerated graying rather than sudden hair loss. In clinical settings, this is often when women describe hair that feels weaker rather than simply thinner, an important distinction that points toward mineral imbalance rather than active shedding alone. The form in which sesame seeds are used makes a significant difference. Whole sesame seeds are difficult to digest efficiently later in life, which limits absorption and reduces their benefit. Tahini, the ground paste made from sesame seeds, offers a gentler and far more absorbable option for aging digestion. A practical approach is 1 tablespoon of tahini daily, spread on soft toast, blended into warm grains, or mixed into smoothies depending on tolerance and preference. Consistency matters more than variety, and tahini is best used daily for 8 to 12 weeks to allow mineral levels to stabilize. This type of support does not produce sudden changes, but over time, many women notice hair that feels stronger to the touch and less prone to breakage. By restoring mineral balance first, the follicle regains the stability it needs to respond to hydration and protein support, which becomes increasingly important in the next phase of recovery. 6. Chia seeds, follicle hydration. There is a subtle stage in hair aging when strands appear dry and lifeless, no matter how much water a woman drinks, creating the false impression that hydration is no longer relevant to hair health. In reality, the issue is rarely about intake alone, but about whether water and water-soluble nutrients can still reach the follicle in a steady, usable way. From a medical standpoint, cellular hydration becomes less efficient with age, especially in tissues like the scalp that already receive reduced circulation. Chia seeds become important here because they influence hydration at a cellular level rather than on the surface. When soaked chia seeds form a gel that slows digestion and helps the body release fluids and nutrients gradually throughout the day. This steady delivery supports follicle function by preventing the repeated cycles of dehydration and rehydration that place stress on aging hair. Clinically, women often describe this phase as hair feeling less brittle, with fewer strands snapping during brushing, which is an early sign that follicle hydration is improving and internal moisture balance is stabilizing. How chia seeds are prepared determines their benefit. Dry seeds sprinkled onto food do not provide the same effect and can be uncomfortable for digestion. A more effective approach is to soak 2 tablespoons of chia seeds in half a cup of water for at least 15 minutes, allowing a soft gel to form. This gel can be added to oatmeal, blended into smoothies, or taken on its own in the morning when hydration patterns are being set for the day. Daily use is more important than quantity, and most women notice changes in hair texture within several weeks rather than days. When follicles remain consistently hydrated, they become more receptive to minerals and protein, creating a smoother transition toward rebuilding strength rather than merely preventing damage, especially in climates or seasons that promote dryness. 7. Hemp seeds, complete protein support. At a certain point after 70, hair loss becomes less about what is falling out and more about what the body can no longer rebuild efficiently, because each new strand requires a precise combination of amino acids that aging digestion often struggles to supply. As metabolism slows and digestive enzymes decline, even adequate diets may fail to deliver usable protein to hair follicles. Many women unknowingly reduce protein intake as appetite changes, teeth become sensitive, or heavy meals feel uncomfortable, and over time this quiet deficit shows up in hair that grows back thinner, softer, and less resilient than before. Medically, this reflects a gap between protein intake and protein utilization, rather than an obvious deficiency. Hemp seeds are uniquely valuable in this stage because they provide a complete amino acid profile in a form that is gentle on the digestive system. Unlike heavier animal proteins, hemp seeds are easier to break down and absorb, which allows the body to access the building blocks needed for keratin production without placing additional strain on digestion or liver function. Clinically, this is often when women begin to notice that new hair feels slightly stronger at the root, even before overall density changes, signaling that follicles finally have the raw materials they need to rebuild rather than simply maintain. Using hemp seeds effectively is straightforward, but requires consistency. 3 tablespoons per day sprinkled onto salads stirred into warm grains or blended into smoothies is sufficient for most women when used daily. There is no benefit to higher amounts, and smaller portions used consistently tend to work better over time, especially for sensitive digestion. Results are gradual, often appearing around 8 to 10 weeks as hair cycles naturally renew and structural proteins are replenished. When follicles receive complete protein in a form they can actually use, they regain the ability to produce sturdier strands, setting the stage for deeper cellular support that goes beyond structure alone. 8. Black cumin seed, Nigella sativa, follicle reactivation. There comes a stage when hair thinning no longer responds to improved nutrition, better hydration, or even adequate protein, leaving many women feeling as though their follicles have simply stopped trying. In medical terms, this often reflects a shift from structural weakness to cellular fatigue, where follicles are still present but no longer produce hair with the same consistency or strength. Rather than being permanently damaged, many of these follicles have entered a low-energy dormant state, quietly conserving resources instead of growing hair. Black cumin seed becomes relevant at this point because it addresses energy at the cellular level rather than focusing only on surface support. Compounds within black cumin seed have been studied for their role in supporting mitochondrial activity, which is essential for energy production inside every living cell, including hair follicles. When cellular energy declines, follicles lose the drive to re-enter the growth phase, regardless of how many nutrients are available. Clinically, this is often the difference between hair that stabilizes and hair that slowly begins to return strand by strand. How black cumin seed is used requires particular care. Quality matters, and cold-pressed black cumin seed oil is generally better tolerated than capsules for older adults. A cautious approach is to begin with half a teaspoon once daily taken with food, allowing the body time to adjust. If digestion remains comfortable, this can be continued consistently for several weeks. This is not a fast-acting solution, and it should never be rushed or combined aggressively with other new supplements at the same time. Over time, women often describe a subtle change first, such as fine hairs appearing along the hairline or parts suggesting that follicles are becoming active again. By restoring cellular energy, gently black cumin seed supports the transition from maintaining hair to reawakening growth, completing the deeper layers of recovery before everything is brought together in the final step. 9. How these seeds work together and how to use them safely. What makes this approach different from most hair routines is that it does not rely on a single hero ingredient, but on a sequence of support that mirrors how aging hair actually functions. In clinical reality, hair thinning after 70 rarely has one cause, and it often reflects multiple small breakdowns happening at the same time. This is why addressing inflammation without protein or hydration, without minerals, often leads to partial results that stall over time and create unnecessary frustration. These seeds work together because each one removes a different biological obstacle, allowing the next layer of nourishment to be used more effectively and predictably. When flax seed calms the inflammatory environment, circulation improves, and follicles become receptive rather than resistant. Pumpkin and sunflower seeds then help stabilize hormonal pressure and improve delivery, while sesame and chia restore the internal conditions that support strength and hydration at the follicular level. Hemp seeds provide the structural protein needed for rebuilding, and black cumin seed supports the cellular energy required to sustain growth. This layered cooperation reflects how the body naturally prioritizes repair, moving from protection to rebuilding in stages, rather than forcing results prematurely. Using this system safely means thinking in terms of consistency, not intensity. Portions should remain moderate. Digestion should always feel comfortable, and changes should be introduced gradually, rather than all at once, to avoid unnecessary stress on the body or digestive system. Most women do best by incorporating these seeds into simple daily meals, such as breakfast or early evening routines, instead of treating them like supplements to be taken sporadically. Results follow a predictable timeline, with internal changes occurring first, shedding slowing next, and visible regrowth appearing later. When used patiently and thoughtfully, this approach respects the pace of the aging body while giving hair follicles the steady support they need to function again naturally and sustainably without overwhelming already sensitive systems. Hair thinning after 70 is not a sign that your body has failed you, and it is certainly not proof that you have done something wrong. What this conversation has shown is that aging hair simply follows a different set of biological rules, ones that respond better to steady nourishment than to isolated supplements or quick fixes. When inflammation is calmed, circulation is supported, minerals are restored, hydration is stabilized, protein is delivered in usable form, and cellular energy is gently encouraged. Hair follicles are given a chance to function again at their own pace. Progress at this stage is subtle at first, but over time it becomes meaningful, especially when routines are consistent and realistic.